And we are live. I'd like to welcome everyone to episode number 5. This is a big milestone for us. Maybe not for others, but for us it is. We are currently at 40 subscribers. It's pretty awesome. You know, this podcast is slow cooking, trying to be authentic and, keeping it interesting for everybody. So please celebrate those milestones with us. Please throw us some comments after you've watched some of the video. Please welcome my partner in crime here, Brendan. Brendan, welcome back, buddy. So tonight we're going to go a little lighter on the episode, and we're going to talk about marrying pillars in preparedness or tasks and things that will help our lifestyle at the same time. So like most people, we could all get in better shape. It's different for everybody, what their goals are and how they can do it, what they have available, what they're willing and able to do at this time. So for me, what I'm going to do over this summer is I'm going to do more walking. I already hike a little bit, but I'm going to do quite a bit more hiking, and I want to build up to it, especially in the more inclement weather. So we have a lot of heat in Florida, and we're about to hit the hot season, and then the rain's going to come. So I'm going to try to prepare myself to have a little bit more endurance and be able to stand more of the inclement weather, and then work my way up to doing a little bit of rucking maybe at the end of the summer. Of course, I'm always trying to encourage other people to do that. I do have a Facebook group that I started, West Central Florida Rucking. I use that as a mechanism to try to get people into doing more hiking and rucking. So we'll learn more about that in future episodes. But for now, one of the things that I've noticed, and Brendan, he'll chime in on it too, is that a lot of times when certain things in preparedness are not sexy, buying the cool gadget or gizmo or weapon or stockpiling this thing or that thing, we miss out on some of the really core things. And one of those we're going to touch base on tonight, and that's the area study. So those of you guys have been floating around YouTube, looking up area studies. One of the better ones that I've seen, or influencers that I've seen talk about it, has been Mike Shelby from Forward Observer. I've consumed a bunch of his content. He has a new book out, sold out in a lot of spots. But if this topic is something of interest to you, you might want to check out his book. So if his book reflects what he talks about in his videos, it's probably worth the buy. Okay. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Brendan and let him start off a little bit and tell his story about his first deep dives into area study, what the environments were, lessons learned, and what have you. All right, Brendan, what are your thoughts on it?
So my stuff with the area study, it was something that, like you said, it's one of those things that if it's not sexy, people kind of put it on the back burner. Everybody's got a gun, but not everybody has paper maps. And I had a buddy tell me that area studies, and to a lesser extent pace count too, knowing your pace count, it's something that everyone knows they need, but nobody does it unless they're forced to. So like the first time I did my pace count, it wasn't setting it out and go, okay, I'm going to set out 100 yards and I'm going to, do it one time. No, you do it 3 times with no ruck on, 3 times with a ruck on, 3 times on pavement, 3 times on a trail with terrain. You try and you get you a good average, and then base your numbers off of that. It very useful when you're working off a paper map rather than the phones we all carry in our pockets if GPS is down or whatever.
Yeah.
And then as far as like doing one around my house, I understood the usefulness of it and did it to a minor scale, but doing stuff like with the grindstone deployments and watching these guys who they'll do one over 3 counties, and then 3 counties with our fob being in the center. And watching them plan it out like that kind of gave me an idea. I was like, oh, that's super useful. Knowing where, now in their case, we're doing a lot of stuff with like chainsaws and heavy equipment.
Mhm.
And for them to have every steel dealership plotted on a map, or to have every, heavy equipment mechanic plotted on a map, is super practical, because if you're down and a piece of equipment is holding up the day and you need somebody to run, yeah, it's cool if you know about the one an hour away, but if there's one
Yeah.
20 minutes up the road and you just didn't realize it, because a lot of times we go in before, cell coverage and internet and things like that are backed up. So we don't have the luxury a lot of the times of just Googling it. So I've really intensified my area studies since doing a lot of the grindstone stuff. So now I keep, as well as I know you do, those the road atlases. I can never, it's McNally or McNand, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Those I keep with me at all times. They're in my vehicle at all times, as well as the translucent paper was something we started instituting, where we would just lay it over whichever map page you're on, and then you just mark your locations from there rather than marking it directly into the book. And then you can do your own little codex there for OPSEC and things like that if that's important to you. But yeah, it's something everyone should know. And if you're trying to institute like healthy lifestyle and exercise and things like that, if it's something you're supposed to do, but you haven't had an excuse to do it,
Mhm.
bring it into a morning jog or something. Pick a
Yeah.
direction, go out. You were talking about the 75 hard the other day, about 75 hard workout challenge.
Yep.
And a part of that is 2 45-minute workouts. So if you take one of those and just make them a jog or a walk for that matter, you'll cover 3 miles in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So just pick a direction and start walking, and then start noting down, the different stuff around you. Sure, you can get a lot from Google Maps, or OnX is one that I really like using. It is behind a paywall, but it's super useful for the things I do, and it gives you offline maps as well. But there's stuff that you're not going to see on Google Maps. You're not going to see the wild fruit tree that's, in the woods, on the edge of the woods, a mile from your house. You're not going to see the, ditch that it just looks like a ditch on Google Maps or whatever, but half the year it's full of water.
Yeah.
Or half the year, maybe you see a body of water on Google Maps and you show up and it's dry. I've run into that problem trying to take my kids fishing, just zooming out on Google Maps looking for ponds and creeks and stuff, and they'll be dry most of the year, but Google Maps will show that it's a body of water.
Yeah.
So you can't always rely on stuff like that, as well as different things of like driving around in a car. You're not going to notice everything when you're driving 45 miles an hour down the road. Are you going to notice the blackberry bushes in the ditch? Are you going to notice the muscadine vines climbing up that chain link fence? Things of that nature. Also, it's really easy to justify a dude going on his afternoon jog versus a dude driving in his car 15 miles an hour looking at everything. That looks a little creepy.
Yes, it does.
So things like that are something to take in mind.
Yeah, it kind of brings up a story of something that happened recently. So in the community that I live in, there's this younger guy. He's probably like, I don't know, early 20s or something. I don't know if he's on the spectrum or not, or if he's just an odd cat. But man, for a long time, you see him standing out on the main road that cuts through the subdivision, and he's got this super nice digital camera, long telescoping lens and everything, and literally he's taking pictures of people in their cars as they're driving by. Okay? Always like creeps me out. You know, especially I got 3 daughters and stuff like that. It's just weird. Why are you doing it? You know? And it's been going on for a while. I think people spoke to him, and then, you know, next thing you know, he's wearing reflective, you know, like when we're at Grindstone, we're wearing a reflective vest.
Yeah.
He started wearing something like that. And the last time I saw him, he was wearing it. And then maybe not even a day later, people were popping up on nextdoor.com. It's like a community neighborhood thing about how this guy that was in a truck stopped because he saw him taking pictures. And he said, "Hey, delete those pictures." And the guy taking pictures like, "I can't do that." Not if it was like, "I won't do it, I can't do it." And I'm like, I don't know where the I can't comes from, because you could just erase them, you know? And why wouldn't you erase them if someone's prompting you to do it? And they started getting into an argument. And I guess supposedly, according to the guy that was taking the pictures, the guy said, "Now, do I need to go and get my gun to make this happen?"
Mm.
So the guy with the camera takes out a can of bear spray and starts spraying the dude. So the dude subsequently does some moves and puts the dude down. Okay, broke his cameras, busted them all up and everything, got in his truck and took off. So then he got some people in the community going, "Oh my God, why did you do that to that guy?" Well, it's quite obvious. Okay, you know, they're both being aggressive in their own ways. You know, this guy's he's being creepy. Then he's being uncooperative. This guy's being aggressive. And then the other one pulls the trigger first, basically, and got bounced a little bit. And then, but it could have escalated to something worse. Yeah. So I bring this up because this day and age, you got to be careful just walking through your neighborhood. And if you're staring too long at somebody, you know, or someone's property, they're going to get nervous. You know, I live in a suburban neighborhood, so there's people always walking around with their dogs, and, you know, I say hi, they say hi, and stuff like that. But then my street also gets a lot of extra traffic because it's near a couple of schools, so people are cutting through my yard. I mean, not my yard, cutting through my street, and I got to be double, triple, quadruple checking before I even get out of my driveway, because I don't know who's coming from whatever direction, because they don't want to wait in the line on the street because of school drop-offs in the morning and stuff like that, and a little bit in the afternoons. But that's part of suburban life. Now, in a rural area, I mean, I've been over your house several times and stuff. You don't have the density that I do, but everyone knows who everyone is. That's what's one difference than in my neighborhood. You know, I might wave to somebody and they wave to me, but I literally know 2 people by name, shake hands, had conversations with on my street. I mean, on your street, how many people do you know by name?
Everybody within a quarter mile of each direction.
Yeah.
Which isn't that sounds like a lot, but it's not. It's not a lot of people, you know.
Right.
I've got
But another factor too is, remember when we were doing the deployment over in Plant City, and those guys in the trucks drove by and they saw us staging in that lady's yard, and they stopped and they started, "What's going on? What are you doing?"
Just wanting to check in on some old friends. Yep.
Right. So that close-knit community, even though you're not there every day or whatever. So I bring these up because I think these are important, you know, factors in an area study, where you got to be careful, and, you know, maybe you can strive to have some stuff. So the more people you have a friendly, "Hey, how you doing?" That's one level. The next level will be, "Hey, I'm Bob, you're John. You know, oh yeah, my kids go to this school, or they do play soccer over here, or, oh, we're retired, or we vacation this place." That's another level of getting to know who's around you. And it makes it important, because if something happens at your property, the more your neighbor knows you, the more likely they're going to have your phone number and give you a call and say, "Hey, you know, this is going on at your house. Someone's creeping around, or they might walk over to a dog. Oh, hey, you know, so are you a friend of John's? And I'd be like,
I've got two stories for that. So I love all my neighbors. My neighbors on it. I've got neighbors on three sides of me. Well, kind of three sides of me. And I love all of them. I had gotten a promotion one time. Now, my promotion was night shift. I was working at the time, and I had a rental vehicle because mine was down. I pulled in at 1 o'clock in the morning in an unfamiliar vehicle in my yard. My neighbor just so happened to be outside in his front yard, and we're not close. I mean, you've seen the yards. It's not like it's popping next door in your neighborhood. Before I could open the door of that vehicle, there was a flashlight in my window. And it wasn't until Ricky saw my face was like, oh, okay, cool. Didn't recognize the car. I knew the wife and kids were home alone.
Yeah.
Sorry, have a nice night, And there's been plenty of times. Ricky's a smoker, so he's always sitting out on his front porch smoking a cigarette. Hey, there's a truck parked out by your mailbox. Oh no, it's cool. I know. So I get stuff like that all the time from him. The second story on the other side of me. So we shoot on the property. That's common out here. But where we normally shoot on my property is about a quarter mile away from the house. So it's toward the back of the property. When my wife was pregnant with our last child, we decided to do something for my older girls, and our gender reveal was 22 tracers. So we would do red tracers for a girl, green tracers for a boy, and I was going to let my two daughters shoot off these 22s to see if it was girl or boy. We'd never shoot at the house, like up toward the house.
Yeah.
And this is another thing, like, know your neighbors, because if your neighbors know your patterns, if something's off, they know. So knowing we never shoot at the house, my daughters let off about 6 rounds, and within 2 minutes, my neighbor on the other side of me was at my back door with a 12-gauge shotgun. Hey, there was shooting at the house. You never shoot at the house. Are you okay? Yes, we're good. We explained the situation. It was also dark because of tracers, so it was odd to be shooting at night anyway. Yeah. But it wasn't, he stopped, he thought about it, he gave me a phone call. He was at our house with a shotgun before we were heading inside. Like he jumped into action, and it's good to have neighbors like that.
Oh yeah. Those relationships make a big difference. And they don't even have to be like true friendships, hanging out all the time, best buds, And I think too many times we're so afraid to interact with our neighbors, or we get upset. Like for me, I wouldn't care if there was a couple of old ladies or old retirement couple near me that are always looking out their window or on their porch, oh, they're all in my business. Oh, well, if you just be friendly with them, odds are, if they're sitting there, they're not Karens. Okay? They're not trying to be all up in everybody's business now. They might be like in the old rural towns where it's small, everybody kind of knows everything. And there are those people in the barber shop or in the hair salon that catch all the gossip. There are some people that are like central processing. So just embrace those things, And in an emergency situation, most people can have a value. Well, if you got people that are not able to, whether it's age or physical hindrances or handicaps, they can't go do all the physical stuff. Well, man, if they're good sitting on a porch with some binos, or just being some eyes, keep an eye, especially with kids running around and everything else, they'll notice things that other people won't, And they're kind of like data repositories because you'll remember the most random stuff that you and I will just like, what? We're flushing that out. You know, we don't have the bandwidth for all that nonsense, but they'll remember that stuff. So now I was thinking, you know, so suburban areas is one extreme in a sense, rural's another. But then you got areas in different towns where they're not suburban, but they're not rural, but they're kind of urban, but they're old urban, you know? So, and you probably see a lot of that out in East. Well, I'm not going to dox where you're at here, but out in your area. And then beyond that, out in Polk County, there might be some like smallish old town urban, which would be different than urban in Tampa. Okay. So what would you, since you've been around your area, what would you do different in that context in old urban versus what you do in your rural area?
So I think in a situation like that, like the old urban, the kind of modern suburban cookie cutter properties, things of that nature, your physical environment means a lot less. So like out where I'm at, if I want to do an area study, I have two directions. I can go east or I can go west. Other than that, I'm cutting through woods. I'm cutting through people's properties, you know? So it's pick a direction, walk, and then I'm noting, okay, what's wild edibles? What's wild medicinals? Hey, this guy a half mile down has 4 pit bulls in his front yard, no fence, and they chase anything that moves, you know? Now, they've never bitten me. They'll run up and bark real loud, but you know, is that a walk I want to take with my 4-year-old? Probably not, you know.
Right.
If I'm in a situation like that where I've got houses closer together, your people are going to be your most valued thing. Make a dish, go to every house within 3 doors of each direction. Hey, I'm so and so. How are you? What do you do for work? You know, even if you've lived there for 20 years, you know, hey, we've never met before. You know, I'm trying to get out, meet new people. How are you? And you're going to learn something pretty quickly. Either, hey, this is a cool person, or wow, that guy's a jerk and I never want to talk to him again, you know,
Yeah.
or he's weird or whatever. Another thing, a lot of people subscribe to the like zombie hordes thought. I'm not sold on that idea, but I definitely understand where it comes from. I happen to believe that food brings people together. To sit down and have a meal with another human being it's an extra layer of connection. So if you're one of those people who think the zombie hordes are going to start coming door to door, most people aren't going to want to, oh man, I don't want to take from that guy. He fed me, or he's a cool guy. But the guy 3 doors down from him, I don't even know his name. Let's go to his house, you know. So as a thought process, that was something I always used to tell people to encourage them to meet their neighbors. We had one guy who he had lived in an apartment for a number of years, and he said he'd never met his neighbor, didn't even know their name. And I get it, you know, it happens sometimes, but there's nothing wrong with just, hey, if you've lived there for 7 years and you've never met your neighbor, knock on their door. Hey, how are you? I just want to say hi. My name is blank. Shake his hand. You know, offer him to dinner or to a drink or something like that. Just try and spark a friendship.
Yeah.
At bare minimum, get some familiarization, you know. So if you go down, one of the things I like to do, and it's common in this neighborhood, but you drive down the street, it's probably 30% of people have gardens in their front yards. So you know there's some level of self-sustainability. Now, what you don't see a lot, but you'll see on a couple of the houses is, hey, that guy's got a ham radio antenna coming off the back of his house. That might be a guy I want to stop and talk to. Hey, man, I see you got a ham radio antenna. I'm just getting into it, or blah, blah, blah. Just start a conversation. So it could be one of those things like, if you're in a neighborhood that's close confines, you might, sorry, my kids and dog are on the other side of the door having a war right now. But if you're in close confines and you've never met your neighbor, well, if you've got something going wrong with your kid and you didn't realize the two doors down, that guy's a pediatrician, he might be a useful dude to know.
Yeah.
Or anything of that nature. So you need a way to get a hold of a loved one, and the guy next door has a Starlink that he can let you use just to send a message, or he has a ham radio that he can bounce off repeaters to get to somebody in your loved one's area. Different stuff like that. I had that happen with me when I was up in Tennessee during Helene. No cell service, no internet service, nothing like that. Wanted to get a hold of my wife and kids. And there was a volunteer there who had a Starlink, and he was driving around to different churches, and he would set his Starlink up for a couple of hours just so people could come and communicate with their loved ones. Hey, I'm safe, I'm alive. And it was nice to be able to, pop on and then use that to, do the little Telegram FaceTime with my wife and kids. Being able to do that a couple of times while you're gone, it's a morale boost.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think some of those things. So, in the rural area, you have less density, and odds are you're more likely to be better prepared than your city dweller or your suburban dweller. But I put a lot of thought lately into, man, where's the density? We talk about, there's so many houses they're building everywhere and what have you. And that does bring some density. But even those people in those houses will have more supplies than we think, because they all go to Costco and Sam's Club, and, they may not have a lot of water per se. They may have a lot of this or that or whatever. But just think about if you're in an apartment. So your average house, say, is like 2,000 square feet. I mean, your apartment is going to be probably maybe 750,000 square feet if you're lucky. What would you say your average 2-bedroom apartment? See, because you're in the trade, so you do
your
different.
Average master bedroom is going to be between 200 and 250 square foot. A regular bedroom, 12 by 10, 12 by 12. So you're looking between 120, 150 foot there. So you figure if that's 50% of your layout, yeah, you're probably looking at 600, 700 square foot, Yeah.
So they're going to have less room to have a lot of supplies. Plus, odds are, if you're in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, you probably don't have kids, or maybe you have like one kid. You don't have your traditional family for the most part. There's always exceptions. But the density on the footprint in an apartment building, I mean, a lot of these, like the newer construction, they're around 4 floors usually. And I'm thinking maybe they're 8 apartments long on either side, So one half of the building is 4 times 8. That's what, 32. Then you throw another 32 on the other side of the building. You're talking like 60 something, 64 units.
64 residencies. So, if there's 3 people living in there, now you're talking over 180 people just in one building.
Yeah, and up where I'm at, man, I mean, they've been building, man, there must be 10 to 15 buildings, and like 3 or 4 of these apartment things have popped up. I mean, that's a lot of density, okay, of people, and with minimal supplies. So it can be easier to meet your neighbors there, is the reason I'm bringing it up. But they fall to the same kind of thing that we do, where we don't, in the suburban world, we don't really talk to our neighbors other than hi if you got a dog. But I think they have a greater need than, say, your suburban household people to be acquainted with their neighbors. Because they have the highest density, the least amount of supplies, and people that probably don't have a lot of resiliency, whether it's age or, what have you, resources, that you're going to see a lot more chaos sooner in an apartment than you're going to see in a suburban community. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're probably right. Yeah, it's population density is going to be it's going to be a problem no matter what is to occur.
Yeah.
If you think nukes are going off, in Orlando and Tampa and Miami and New York and LA and all that, you guys are going to be looking for food, and an apartment complex isn't going to have as much food as a farm. Simple as that. So population density is going to be a problem there. If you think it's just going to be a slow economic burn, you're probably going to have more theft at an apartment complex than you are the 5-acre homestead.
Yeah.
3 miles down the street. 3 miles at the end of the street just to get to that 5-acre homestead.
Yeah.
You're not going to have people going out there. A lot of the times, criminals like to stay close to home.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of why we see a lot of the major crime in the U.S. like down in the population dense areas.
Yeah.
The big metroplexes. Yeah.
Yeah. This is where people are going to sit there and be more apt to try to kick people's doors in and what have you. They may not do it on their own floor because the odds are they'll know more of their neighbors.
Well, we saw that with the gangs out in Colorado. They started instituting rent to the apartment complex residents. Like it's like, okay, you now pay an extra $200 a month to us to keep us from kicking your door in and taking everything. And they just went door to door and then just surrounded the building so no one could leave until everyone was paid up.
Yeah. It kind of is a more nefarious means of what the mobs used to do. They come around and, collect money from everyone. Oh, it's for security. It's for protection, a protection racket, basically. But at least they're a lot more smooth about it, But that Colorado stuff was just so, like, blatant and one way. So I put a lot of thought into, people in apartments and stuff, and how could I help them, like with solar. Our buddy Nate, who's out in Chicago now, and he lives in an older style apartment. He doesn't live in the newer suburban style apartments here. And when I chatted with him about how he was going to use solar, he has access to his roof. He was going to throw some panels up there, and he might have been maybe 1 floor below or 2 floors below, and he was going to drop some solar cables down the side and charge his batteries. That works out pretty good. I was just thinking just the other day, what is a way you could sit there and your average patio in these new style apartments, I mean, they're probably 10 feet wide, maybe? What would you think?
Yeah.
So how many solar panels could you sit there and, just say you had a way to mount it on the railing, which are not that strong, so you'd have to build some support into it. But you could stick them over the edge of your balcony if you have one. I mean, how many can fit across? You could probably fit maybe 4 100-watt solar panels.
Assuming you're facing the right direction, too. If you're facing like east and you've got another building pretty close, you might be screwed on that one.
Yeah. So it's not a silver bullet for everybody, but it allows a lot of opportunity for some people to do something, is the point I was getting at. So as part of my area study that I'm going to do over the summer, I'm going to sit there and kind of like look at the different apartment buildings around me and see what could they do, you know. Might be able to help some people. By me helping myself, I could help some other people as well, because otherwise you're kind of stuck, you know. And of course, the more people we have prepared, the less burdensome they are on everybody else, and they could be self-reliant. So area studies are not just for you, it's also for your neighbors and for everyone else. And so if you take the time and effort to do an area study, no matter where you're at, and something happens, you can share that information with your neighbors. Now, they might not be able to make any preparations based on it, but at least they have a better understanding. Hey, that retention pond over there, don't go get water from it. Okay? It's got too many runoff chemicals in it. There's no deer in those woods right there. Don't eat those frankenfish. Also, bodies of water where predators go to get people, right? And just say that you can drink that water. Well, then you can sit there, here, be smart about it. You don't want to make 10 trips to the pond to get water. Say you're going to use it for whatever reason. You got the right containers for it? You have a little beach buggy that you could throw some containers in to go grab it. Stay off of that street over there. There's XYZ kind of people that live over there. That's one thing about suburban areas. You think that it's picturesque everywhere. But like anything else, they sit on the edge. They don't build these suburban areas in the city where there was already buildings. They build suburban housing, what used to be either farmland or just rural land that people, have lived on for 30, 40 years. There is an area near me. I won't mention a name so no one stalks me from the internet. But I went and looked at property there because I wanted to be a little bit more rural. And there was a lot of 1 acre lots in there. But still be close enough to everything for my kids to have the good schools and, what have you, and the parent sharing with their mom. And so I went in there, and what was crazy about it, you'd see a traditional cinder block built house on a couple of the beginning plots. And then you'd see some manufactured home or some modular homes and stuff like that in decent condition. But the deeper you got into it, a lot of the degradation. Okay, well, that manufactured home was not really kept very well. And then this one was all run down and wasn't even livable. This was an empty lot where they had a bunch of busted up boats and cars on it. Looks like a meth lab over here, And this is literally in the center. It's surrounded, okay, on all ends of like expensive suburban houses. So it's like this central park, not the same size, but that green space, rural space in between all the suburban area. So when you're doing an area study, it's like, oh, it's pretty safe up here. There's all these nice houses and all this commercial stuff, and we got good schools. Well, we got this little pocket over here. You might get some trouble from that. Now, do you see anything like that out in your area?
So a new one that has started. I am on the outskirts of a city, so I'm actually an unincorporated area, so I'm not in city limits. But the city that I'm closest to decided they were going to clean up their homeless problem.
God.
And by clean up their homeless problem, they loaded them all up and they dropped them out in the country. So probably about 10 miles from here, there is this giant homeless encampment that they literally set them up. Cops drove them out, and they are set up in a state park on the edge of the state park that's away from the touristy camping fishing area.
Uh-huh.
Dude, it's hundreds of yards wide by hundreds of yards long, and it's got to have at least 100 people camping out there under tarp shelters. And they recently got a roll off dumpster out there that some guy just buys. One dude operates a mechanic business out of there. He lives in a tent and has cars pull up, and then he just, it's like, I don't blame you for trying to make a dollar. I'm all for capitalism, but
He's by draining all his fluids right there.
Say again?
It's by draining all the fluids right there.
Right into the river, which, by the way, that river is the drinking supply for most of Tampa. So one of the things that I've noticed, knowing a few people who live over in that area, or, at least having conversations with them, yeah, theft has gone up big time. Now, everyone seems to say it's about the same.
Freeze up?
Huh? Can you hear me?
You still there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Yeah, same here.
Okay. Cool. You froze for a minute.
Yeah, you did too.
Where'd you lose me at?
We're here to make sure before the next episode. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, we're good.
What was the last thing you heard from me?
Let's see. The mechanic and hundreds of yards in either direction, dumping it in the river, drinking water.
Yeah. So talking to a few people who live over in that area, is everybody stealing? Is everybody being a jerk about things? No, not by a long shot. Some people are just, they're down on their luck. I'm sure there's a lot of mental health problems involved in that. I'm sure there's drug addiction involved in that. But there's definitely been a ramp up in theft, bikes going missing and, dumb stuff like scrap metal taken out of your yard and things like that. That's happening constantly. Now, the general consensus is most people have narrowed it down to about the same 5 or 6 guys.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a problem if there's 5 or 6 guys constantly stealing, Now,
is that something in your neck of the woods where you guys straighten things out, or you leave it up to law enforcement to straighten it out?
Well, unfortunately, it's in an area that's very close to a county line. So that the county, they actually just over the county line from where I'm at. So the county that they are residing in, they're far enough out that they don't care. So it's from their city.
Yeah.
That city that they're close to is all kind of old people and retirement homes anyway. Or it was, a few years ago. Since the influx the last 5 years, it's kind of changed demographic a little bit, but for the most part it is. But it's one of those things that they've got nowhere to go, and as long as they're not in the city on the streets, the cops would rather them be out there. When you drive by, you see cops out there a couple of times a week. They're not trying to clean it up. They're not. There's a local church that comes through and brings them boxes of trash bags because the trash is just absolutely everywhere. I watched a dude unload an entire bed full of trash bags. Like I said, they loaded it up on a roll-off dumpster, and there was still trash on the ground.
Wow.
There's some church groups that go out there and set up little makeshift food kitchens for a couple hours. And again, I am all for charity, but you need to find the root of the problem. It's the whole feed a man a fish versus teach a man to fish kind of deal.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, okay, let's give you a meal. Also, let's get you off Oxycontin, or let's get you a job, or let's, what behaviors, what things are causing this systemic problem that you're having. You can't hold a job because you're constantly losing your mind on people, or you're getting into arguments, or you can't listen to any form of authority. Break it down from there. Do you have anxiety problems, depression problems, bipolar, whatever? A lot of time gets rooted back to childhood and just bad coping mechanisms. I worked in a rehab for a few years as a behavioral health technician, and you hear the same childhood and teenage stories over and over and over again, and it just comes down to bad coping skills a lot of the time. That's not true for everybody, but a lot of the time it is. And it's just something simple as they found dope before they found a better way to deal with their problems, and then they get hooked.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. Yeah, it makes sense. Kind of slightly reminiscent of Amsterdam from The Wire, the HBO. You ever seen that show?
No.
It's so great show. One of the best shows they put out. Went on for, I think, 4 seasons, and it was based on true stories of Baltimore, and pretty much looking at it from a couple lenses. One was the drug dealers' lenses, and the other from the cops' lenses, and how it impacted the personal lives of both groups and what have you. And in the later seasons, one of the retired cops, he was like a high up cop. He said, how about we just put everyone in this from X blocks either way, similar to that space, and push all the shenanigans, the drug dealing, the prostitution, everything that encompassed it, push it all into this area. And if you stayed from here to here and here to here, the police just stayed on the outside, we're going to leave you alone. Okay? As long as there's no one dropping bodies, or, doing nefarious stuff, y'all can just do what you got to do. And they would bring in social services where they can help with the kids and people that want to get off the drugs and healthcare and stuff like that. Basically went on under the nose of the police commission for a while, and they're seeing all these stats going down, and they're so used to lying and padding about the stats, they couldn't understand how everything was down and doing good in all these areas, except for this one. So they called it Amsterdam, Now, granted, what's going on there is just a small sliver of what was in the fictional show. But, is that something that, they tried to do that they didn't try to do that. But then it kind of makes me think of, what was it? Was it San Francisco during COVID? What they call that little community?
Oh, you're talking up in Seattle, Chaz?
Yeah, Seattle. Yeah, Chaz. Yeah. It's another example of, you just kind of like blocking everything off. I mean, they kind of self-blocked it off. And in the end, that stuff is not sustainable, is the point that I'm making. Whether it implodes from the inside or the people on the outside are like, nope, we can't have this. Even if it's helping one thing but hurting another thing.
I'm going to flip this light on. I'm losing daylight over here.
Yeah.
There you go. You can see me again.
Yeah, you're doing better. So, what would you like to do with area studies that you haven't tried yet?
I don't know about haven't tried, but at least I would definitely like to get more detailed. I have a brother who he institutes something that I think's really it's a really good idea, but it's one of those things like how much time are you willing to invest? You
Yeah.
know, he has 3 routes out of his house that he can go, 3 routes out from his job, 3 routes out from his wife's job, 3 different routes out to my house. If, Lord forbid, his house becomes untenable, he needs to get to my house. We have a system set up that me and my family can function on his property, he and his family can function on mine. So every location that he considers a possible get home from or get to, he does 3 routes, detailed routes, which makes a lot of sense because if you're going out the way you normally go, but it hits a major thoroughfare and you bottleneck out and they're now stuck, I have something like that around my property, but it ends at my property. I don't have 3 routes out to your place. I
Yeah.
know 1 route out to your place. I'm sure I could find other routes with a map, but so when Milton hit here, it took me from getting to roughly where I live, what should have been a 15-minute drive. We had stayed 2 hours away. But when I got back to my area, what should have been a 15-minute drive took me 45 minutes because I was blocked off from 3 directions. I was coming from the north, headed south to my property. The west was blocked off, the east was blocked off, and the north was blocked off. I had to go down the major highway, which was mostly flooded out, that they were turning people around because the water was too high. However, I drive a truck and I just drove around them because it didn't seem that high to me. I understand people who have never driven through water where they would have their hesitancy, and I dang sure wouldn't have taken it in a car. But in my truck, I was confident enough to drive through the water. Had to go up, come across had to go east, and then drive up into my property, completely bypass my property by miles just to get up. Had to stop at one point, cut trees out of the road. Thankfully, I keep a chainsaw.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, you better have multiple routes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be different for everybody. I know when I initially tried to take my first stab at area study, it was so big in the way I was approaching it, and I say that in the sense of, because it's like I was trying to know every major road, every side road, every trail. Now, I happen to live in an area where there's trails, that run along highways, and I'm like, okay, where does that trail connect to? Because not only was I thinking about, okay, if I want to leave, but what if I have people coming to me? What if they can't get their car down to where I'm at? Okay, what trails that are in my area that they could connect? So there's one major east-west highway, okay, that I live near, okay. Above it, okay, probably 15, 20 minutes driving, is the next one in the sequence of numbers. Well, there's like 2 major like wilderness type areas with trails, where I've hiked, some of them. And I'm thinking, oh, well, if I sit there and I map this out, because I have not hiked through that whole park, but they used to connect. Now they got divided because they built a road extension and stuff like that, which I've driven on. And my friend has gone from one end to the other. And he kind of I don't know if there was something under for animals to pass through, or he hopped a fence or whatever the case may be. But that made it more complicated. but that's still long. And a lot of it's unshaded, you know? So if somebody doesn't have something, you know, they're coming from out of town and they hop there, they don't got the proper footwear, man, that's going to be pretty rough on them. Something like, I need to find a lot of different ways. And then, man, if I had an ATV, well, I could come across a lot of this stuff, or a golf cart. But, you know, I don't have a golf cart. You know, but some people in my community do. But there was just so many different ways of doing something. So when I approach it this time, I'm going to start from the center and work my way out and just do a little bit of it each time and kind of keep it tied into other things. Because otherwise, if you get paralysis by analysis, it becomes too big and then overwhelming, and you lose all your problem solving capabilities because your brain's like freezing up from it.
So what I would recommend in that case, and for anybody, and this goes not just for area studies, but most things, start general to detailed, small to large. So, you know, if you're just starting out, okay, you know, 1 mile in each direction, just be familiar with the roads. Real general, pretty small. Well, then when you're confident with that, work your way. Okay, now you want 3 miles in every direction, just the roads.
Yeah.
General, a little larger. And then eventually get up to, okay, you can drive 30 minutes in each direction, you know, give or take about 25, 30 miles. And you can find your way home well without a map or anything. And then you start to detail it down. Okay, now I know all the roads. Well, now I know all the bottlenecks because I know there's a school over here. So in the morning and in the afternoon, that place sucks. Or, hey, there's a 2-way stop sign over here that gets backed up because the right-of-way lane constantly has traffic. So it gets backed up for 6 miles. We've got one of those over in our area where the GPS will take you there every single time because on paper it's the shortest one. You will be at that stop sign for 45 minutes. Or you could just make one right, jump on the highway, and then you're good. You know, bypass that all completely, even though on paper or on the GPS it's an extra 2 minutes to your trip. Then once you get all that out of the way, if you're a plant nerd like me, then start looking where are the wild edibles, where are the wild medicinals, you know, are there fruit trees along your path? There used to be this app, and I can't think of the name of it right now, but I'm sure if you Googled the description of it, you'd be able to find it, where people will log edible plants just out and about. So if they find something in a ditch, or there's, you know, a loquat bush on the edge of a street or something like that, or there's an orange tree in the state park, people would log that so you could pull up this map and find all these fruit trees and wild edibles and useful plants all in your area. I can't remember the name of it.
Well, it reminds me of, so when I go hiking, I use the All Trails app. I have a subscription for it. And I think you're able to log some milestones. I'm going to look a little bit deeper into it to see what other stuff I could log into it. And if that app can't do it, there must be something out there. You know, people that are going through an Appalachian Trail and what have you, and they're documenting everything. So, I mean, if you can sit there and pinpoint, longitude, latitude, you know, also give a description, some details of what's there, that's great. You know, I mean, at the very least, All Trails will let me it'll record my walk and give me all my details and elevation and stuff like that. And then I could just save it. So I'm like, okay, let me go try to do this one. I want to take a slightly different route next time, you know? One thing I like about that Onyx app, because I know you use it. One of my neighbor buddies I used to go hiking with, he uses it too. Because isn't that the one that It lets you know what's private hunting property or private property and what have you.
Yeah, so it gives you so by law, if I shoot an animal and it jumps onto the other property, I have to try and get a hold of the property owner. So it will give you the owner of the property's name. It will give you their taxable address where all their mail goes. So it's not all you're not always guaranteed to find the address of the property you're doing. So, like, if somebody owns multiple properties, you're only going to get where their mail is sent because by law you have to try and get contact. And so, yeah, it gives you a bunch of different stuff like that. It gives you, is this public land? Is it private land? What is the historical temperatures around there? What's the wind blow like? What's the is it agricultural land? Is it state park? So on and so forth. It's pretty detailed.
Yeah. I'm going to do a little more research and check out the different things. This conversation that we're having tonight is really just a starter conversation. Because I think that's one of the hardest things for people to do is just to start, and sometimes people don't find the value in actually doing it. Like many things in preparedness, people's value in it sometimes depends on, their emotion that's attached to it. If it's fear, then that might be a motivator for them to do X, Y, Z. But if they have fear, it might hinder them from doing X, Y, Z. You just never know. But I think we'll have many more conversations about this. And I also got to try to figure a way where we can get some more interaction from the viewers on this stuff. Where we can take their questions, get some insights from them and their experience. Maybe we'll do a live stream or something. We get enough interest in that. Do something cool like that. All right. Is there anything else you want to add, Brendan, before we close this out?
No, I think that was pretty good.
All right. Well, great conversation as always. And everyone, please, this one's a little bit shorter. We're trying to make more specific content so we can bring some of these episodes to a smaller amount and put them out a little more frequent. But we also want more interaction from everybody. So please, if you are watching this and you like it or you liked one of our previous episodes, please encourage your friends to chime in and watch our episodes, to like and subscribe. Throw some comments in there, ask us some questions, email us. We want to have more interaction with everybody to help build this community and put out content that you guys want and keep it authentic. And we need your help to do that. All right. So everyone, please stay tuned for later episodes and give us some feedback. And hopefully everyone has a great rest of their week. And I didn't say what the time, the date of this. Well, today is May 28th. Hope everyone had a great and family-oriented Memorial Day. I know Memorial Day is really about the ones that have fallen. But it's also using that sacrifice that they've made to be purposeful in their life and intentional with their family and not let their sacrifices be in vain. All our freedoms are based on those that have sacrificed before us, whether they've fallen on the battlefield or in the line of duty in the streets or just helping build this country or protecting their families. All right, everyone. Everyone have a great night. Look forward to seeing you guys next episode and all the interaction. All right, you guys have a great one.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to like and subscribe and share with your friends. We will see you next time.